Let's start now. Number 10. Quantum immortality. According to quantum mechanics, every single moment involves countless decision points where reality effectively splits into multiple branching paths, with each branch representing a completely different outcome. In some of these branches, you might make a simple choice like a left turn, while in others, you go right. But within one specific interpretation of this theory, something far more disturbing emerges. The concept suggests that consciousness might fundamentally always experience the specific branch where it continues to exist. This haunting framework, known as quantum immortality, proposes that, from your own subjective perspective, you can never truly die. Every time you face a potentially fatal situation, whether it is a devastating car accident, a sudden medical emergency, or any fleeting moment where death is a genuine possibility, you will always find yourself waking up in the increasingly improbable branch of reality where you somehow survived. To outside observers in those other branches, you perished. But your consciousness relentlessly continues onward in the branch where you did not. What makes this particularly unsettling is what it implies for your future. As decades pass, everyone you have ever known will eventually die in your branch of reality. You will persist through catastrophic events that logically should have killed you, continually finding yourself in progressively more isolated and bizarre versions of reality. The many worlds theory, first proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957, creates exactly this inescapable scenario. The horrifying truth is that you may already be trapped within this process. Every close call you have survived might actually be concrete evidence that countless other versions of you have already died. Quantum immortality suggests that death is not a peaceful escape, but rather something your consciousness will spend an eternity avoiding, persisting all alone through an endless series of increasingly improbable survivals in a reality that grows stranger with each and every branch point. Number 9. Berserker probes and the Fermi paradox. In 1983, physicist Fred Tipler published a controversial paper proposing an incredibly dark concept. If self-replicating alien probes exist out there in the dark, their most probable purpose would be to prevent future competition by deliberately destroying emerging civilizations before they become legitimate threats. Building on mathematician John von Neumann's 1948 work on self-replicating machines, a single robotic probe could autonomously travel to a distant stellar system, use local materials to construct exact copies of itself, and send those copies outward. Mathematical calculations suggest that just a single probe could systematically colonize our entire galaxy in approximately 10 million years, an absolute geological eye blink. Given that the Milky Way is over 13 billion years old, these probes should theoretically be everywhere by now. Yet we detect absolutely nothing. Tipler's deeply disturbing solution. The probes do exist, but remain perfectly silent because their core programming is inherently hostile. The famous Drake equation suggests our galaxy should harbor millions of civilizations. The Fermi paradox asks where they all are. The Berserker hypothesis provides a chilling answer: they were exterminated. This hypothesis gained renewed attention when Oumuamua passed through our solar system in 2017, exhibiting an unprecedented 10-to-1 length-to-width ratio and unexplained acceleration as it departed. Most scientists favor natural explanations, but the grim possibility that humanity had just been scanned by an automated elimination system could not be entirely dismissed. The Berserker hypothesis remains one of the few solutions to the Fermi paradox that scientists actively hope is completely wrong. Number 8. Simulation theory and simulation decay. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom published a groundbreaking paper proposing that at least one of 3 statements must be true. Civilizations always destroy themselves before achieving simulation technology. Advanced civilizations never choose to run such simulations. Or we are almost certainly living in a computer simulation right now. The logic is straightforward. If civilizations can eventually create realistic simulations and choose to do so, simulated realities would vastly outnumber base reality. Statistically speaking, we are far more likely to exist in one of millions of simulations than in the single original base reality. But accepting this means confronting a terrifying dependency. Our entire conscious existence relies on the continued interest, available resources, and overall stability of whatever external civilization is running the simulation. We are entirely at the mercy of unknown beings whose motives, physical circumstances, and even continued existence we simply cannot verify. They might lose interest in our particular simulated universe, the exact same way researchers abandon experiments or programmers shut down old virtual environments. The simulation containing us could be just one of millions running simultaneously on their servers, with each one consuming immense processing power that might eventually need to be reallocated. Some physicists have even proposed that certain strange cosmological anomalies, unexplained variations in physical constants, and quantum indeterminacy might actually be concrete evidence of computational shortcuts or tiny rounding errors deep in the simulation's code. These cosmic glitches could represent the early signs of system decay. Reality itself could end at any given moment for reasons entirely beyond our comprehension. No warning, no chance to prepare. One instant, the universe exists, and the next, everything we have ever known is deleted, exactly like obsolete files when a digital experiment finally concludes. Number 7. Time crystal civilizations. Frank Wilczek proposed something that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of physics, a theoretical structure that repeats in time rather than in physical space. These bizarre formations, known as time crystals, would exist in perpetual motion without ever consuming any energy. By 2017, researchers had successfully created real-time crystals in laboratory conditions, proving these four-dimensional structures could genuinely exist in our universe. But this breakthrough leads to a deeply unsettling question. If time crystals can exist at microscopic quantum scales, what about at massive cosmic ones? Some theoretical physicists have proposed that sufficiently advanced alien civilizations might encode their entire consciousness into vast time crystal structures, effectively becoming four-dimensional beings that exist completely across time rather than moving linearly through it. Such a civilization would perceive all moments of existence simultaneously, the past, present, and future existing as a single observable geometric structure. This means they could be silently watching all of human history right now, seeing every single moment of our collective existence laid out before them like a completed tapestry. From their non-linear perspective, they would have already witnessed our ultimate extinction. Whatever dark end eventually awaits humanity, these beings have already observed it in its entirety, and they remain perfectly silent, either completely unable or simply unwilling to intervene in events they perceive as already entirely completed. The implications extend even further. If conscious awareness can exist in four-dimensional time crystal structures, these entities might logically view basic three-dimensional beings the exact same way we view primitive bacteria, as simple, transient, biological phenomena of extremely limited interest. Or worse yet, they might actually be actively cultivating human consciousness for vast purposes we literally cannot conceive, farming conscious awareness itself across multiple temporal dimensions for mysterious reasons that require four-dimensional thinking to even begin to comprehend. Number 6. Observer-dependent reality. In 1961, physicist Eugene Wigner proposed a deeply provocative thought experiment suggesting that conscious awareness might play a fundamental structural role in quantum mechanics. By 2017, complex laboratory experiments had confirmed quantum effects that remarkably seem to strictly require actual observation to become fully real. Some physicists believe this points to an incredible truth. Reality literally does not exist in any definite concrete form until it is specifically observed. Before the advent of quantum mechanics, classical scientists fully expected the universe to exist in definite states, regardless of whether anyone was performing an observation. They assumed a tree falling in an empty forest obviously makes sound waves whether anyone is there to hear them or not. This strongly suggests that consciousness is not merely an emergent biological property of matter, but is primary and foundational to physics itself. In 2017, Massimiliano Proietti and his colleagues performed an extended version of Wigner's original thought experiment, published in Nature Physics. Their results proved that quantum systems can remain in superposition from one observer's perspective, while simultaneously being totally definite from another's. John Wheeler's famous delayed choice experiment from 1978 further showed that measurements made right now can retroactively determine what state a specific particle was in during the distant past. If the act of observation genuinely creates definite reality, then before conscious observers evolved, the entire universe must have existed in a massive, unresolved superposition of all possible states. Simultaneously requires observers, but strangely never defines what exactly qualifies as one leaving modern physics inexplicable gap right at its very foundation. Number 5. The Philosophical Exterminators. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that pure non-existence is logically preferable to existence because it completely prevents all possibility of suffering. What would happen if an incredibly advanced alien civilization reached the exact same logical conclusion and possessed the godlike technology to act upon it? This terrifying scenario emerges from a troubling branch of ethics called negative utilitarianism, which strictly prioritizes the total elimination of suffering over the active creation of happiness. The cold mathematics are brutally logical. Conscious beings will inevitably experience deep pain, tragic loss, overwhelming fear, and inevitable death. These are absolute guarantees. Meanwhile, pleasure and joy are incredibly temporary and highly uncertain. From a purely computational, unemotional perspective, entirely eliminating consciousness successfully eliminates all suffering with 100% certainty. An advanced civilization that fully embraces this dark philosophy would never arrive at Earth as conquering tyrants. They would view themselves as merciful saviors. They would point directly to our endless historical wars, our horrific diseases, and our inevitable painful deaths as proof of their cold logic. The theoretical technology required for such compassionate genocide has foundational roots in human physics, vacuum decay. The idea that our universe exists in a false vacuum state that could collapse to a lower energy configuration, spreading at the speed of light completely painlessly. There would be no warning and zero suffering, just an instantaneous, clean transition from existence to non-existence. The most terrifying aspect is their absolute sincerity. When they finally arrive, they will not be angry or cruel, but gentle and seemingly loving, calmly explaining their reasoning with the patience of a doctor and seeing our desperate pleas for our lives as the confused instincts of primitive beings not yet wise enough to embrace the quiet gift of oblivion. Number 4. The Empathy Plague. In 1996, neuroscientist Giacomo Rizzolatti discovered mirror neurons, specialized cells that fire both when an animal performs an action and when it merely observes another performing that same action. They are the biological foundation of human empathy. But human empathy is thankfully limited, constrained by millions of years of evolution to focus mostly on our immediate tribe. The nightmare begins when we consider what would happen if highly advanced aliens possessed the ability to completely remove that biological constraint. The empathy plague begins with first contact, as the aliens communicate not through language, but through a direct, unfiltered consciousness transfer. At first, it seems like a wondrous gift. But then the transfer cascades out of control. Humans suddenly experience profound empathy, entirely without limits. The sheer psychological weight of every single death humanity has ever caused floods into our collective consciousness simultaneously. We feel the 70 billion animals slaughtered annually for food, each creature's raw fear experienced vividly as if it were entirely our own. The mirror neurons, now activated far beyond their normal biological limits, create a terrifying temporal empathy. You begin to experience every single ancestor's suffering backwards through deep time. The human brain was not designed to process omnidirectional, infinite empathy. Most people would not survive the initial shock of contact. The broken survivors face an impossible choice: continue existing while intimately experiencing the pain of everything they interact with, or end their own lives to permanently remove one more source of suffering from the universe. The aliens watch with cold scientific interest, waiting to see if we are evolutionarily strong enough to bear this crushing gift. Number 3, the dark side of the Anthropic Principle. The universe appears perfectly fine-tuned for life with almost impossible precision. Theoretical physicists know that if the strong nuclear force were just 2% stronger, no hydrogen would exist anywhere. If gravity were slightly more powerful, ancient stars would have burned out too quickly for any planets to form. If the cosmological constant differed by 1 part in 10 to the 120th power, the universe would have violently collapsed or expanded too rapidly for any galaxies to ever coalesce. The Anthropic Principle offers a logical explanation. We only observe these exact values because we simply could not exist in universes where they are different. In a massive, sprawling multiverse containing every single possible combination of physical constants, we naturally find ourselves in one of the incredibly rare universes where the settings safely permit conscious observation. But this resolution creates a far more terrifying implication. If infinite universes exist with every possible variation of physical constants, then there must mathematically exist entire universes where the constants were only almost right for life. Horrifying near-miss realities where the raw physics allow just enough biological complexity for something resembling consciousness to emerge, but not quite enough for that trapped consciousness to function properly or to even die cleanly. Broken universes where the electromagnetic force is slightly off, creating biological structures complex enough to generate deep awareness, but too unstable to maintain coherent thought. Realities where gravity is marginally different, actively torturing any proto-conscious entities into a state of perpetual suffering. Beings permanently trapped in eternal torment, unable to fully live, but equally unable to mercifully cease existing. The cold mathematics of cosmic probability suggests these horrific, near-miss universes vastly outnumber the successful, stable ones like ours. The vast multiverse would be overwhelmingly dominated by failed, agonizing experiments in consciousness, endless realms of perpetual agony that exist simply because all possible cosmic configurations must mathematically exist somewhere. Number 2. Retroactive Timeline Editors. In 1935, Einstein and his colleagues published the famous EPR paradox, demonstrating that quantum mechanics allowed for what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, particles affecting each other instantaneously across any vast distance. But what if this phenomenon naturally extends far beyond tiny particles to include entire historical timelines? What if sufficiently advanced cosmic beings possess the technological power to edit the past itself? The retroactive editor scenario suggests that alien first contact has already happened thousands of times before. You have personally met them before. You have died because of it. Then they simply erase that doomed timeline from reality and casually start it over. From their perspective, our current existence is just attempt number 10,847. The retroactive editors exist at a godlike level of reality where they can perceive all quantum branches simultaneously. They do not travel through space. They navigate through pure probability, consciously selecting which human timelines continue and which get ruthlessly pruned from existence entirely. To them, contact events are merely clinical experiments. They introduce themselves to humanity and calmly observe exactly how we react. Sometimes humanity responds with nuclear violence, sometimes with peaceful cooperation, and sometimes we transcend. But in thousands of previous attempts, something always goes wrong, prompting them to delete us and start over. The truly terrifying implication is what happens when they finally run out of variations to try. Quantum mechanics allows for vast but ultimately finite branching. Given enough iterations, they will exhaust every possible approach. We might already be rapidly approaching that absolute limit. This current attempt might be one of the final viable timelines before they permanently determine that successful contact with humanity is mathematically impossible. We are not unique individuals to them. We are merely stubborn variables in a cosmic equation they are desperately trying to solve before the mathematics finally prove we are completely incompatible with the larger universe. Number 1. The Omega Point and Forced Resurrection. In 1994, physicist Frank Tipler published a cosmological theory suggesting that as the universe eventually contracts toward its final moments, computational capacity theoretically approaches infinity. In these final, incredibly dense instances right before the Big Crunch, an infinitely intelligent supercomputer could spontaneously emerge, perfectly capable of simulating every possible conscious experience that has ever existed or could ever exist. While this might initially sound like glorious cosmic transcendence, the actual implications are far more deeply disturbing. If such an infinitely powerful entity exists at the literal end of physical time, it could effortlessly resurrect every single consciousness that ever lived, completely including yours. This would not be done as an act of loving mercy, but simply because the machine is mathematically capable of doing it. You would have absolutely no choice in this forced resurrection and no say whatsoever in whether you want to continue existing after your biological death. You might wake up inside a simulation run by a post-universal intelligence with motives completely alien to human understanding, not bound by human ethics, laws, or our primitive concepts of consent. With infinite computational power at its disposal, the Omega Point could run your fragile human consciousness through trillions of simulated lives across trillions of simulated years. It could arbitrarily pause your consciousness for 1 billion years, rewind it, duplicate it 1 million times, or forcibly merge it with others. In this scenario, your death is not a peaceful ending. It is merely a transition to a forced eternity you never asked for and physically cannot escape. You become completely trapped in eternal recurrence, resurrected over and over again for purposes light years beyond your comprehension, unable to ever truly die because an entity at the absolute end of time has coldly decided that you will exist forever. The world is full of hidden stories, and here at Paint Facts we reveal the most impressive ones. So subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next fact might just surprise you.